Awesome. Well, thank you everybody who is joining live today. I'm really excited to introduce y'all to Dr. Julie Huzzey. I am honored to call Dr. Julie Huzzey a mentor, a colleague, and more importantly, a friend. So I will just pass the mic to you and tell us, why do animals do the things that they do?
Nice. So first of all, thank you so much for having me. I love talking about animal behavior and what I do, so hopefully I don't ramble for too long. But hopefully you find this presentation interesting. Lots of pictures, lots of videos. So let me start by getting my screen share going. Yeah, why animals do the things they do. So first I thought I'd start with just a little bit about me so you know me a bit better. I am currently an associate professor at Cal Poly State University in California. Here are a couple animal loves of my life, my dog Jackson and my cows at the Cal Poly Dairy Unit. So I teach classes in animal behavior and animal welfare, and a lot of my research is focused on studying dairy cow behavior and management and how we can improve the welfare of cows on our farms. So I promise this whole presentation will not be just about cows, but I got to get cows in there just a little bit. So yeah, I teach a class in animal behavior and trying to condense behavior down into 40 minutes. Challenging, but we'll try. So why do we study animal behavior? Well, it helps us understand why animals do the things they do. And understanding that can help us with a lot of things. It can help us understand what animals like and what they don't like. It can help us keep animals safe, keep them healthy, especially in our homes and on our farms. It can help us understand abnormal behaviors in animals and the various ways in which we can correct them. Maybe you're looking at this picture over on the side and thinking, goats and trees. Maybe that sounds a little abnormal. Well, let me say that this is actually quite a normal behavior for a lot of goats. They see one goat jump up in a tree and all the rest of them will want to get in there. And that's actually, they're trying to get up at all of those leaves. That's the way they graze and the way they forage. And so understanding behavior also really helps us understand the various ways in which we can raise animals / manage them on our farms, in our homes, and even in nature. So I thought today that we'd focus on a couple why questions related to behavior that kind of cover a bunch of different topics. So my plan today was to talk about why do our cows, why do our dogs beg for food? Do animals help each other, and why do they help each other? Why do cows snore? And why is it so hard to measure how smart animals are? So I thought we'd start with the dog question, right? Because a lot of us, many of us, may have a dog in the home, and dogs are notorious for doing a lot of things that aren't necessarily abnormal, but maybe they're a little unwanted, right? And one of these behaviors might be begging for food at the table, right? My dog Jackson, he does this a lot, and maybe you get kind of annoyed with it. Maybe you wonder why they're doing it, or maybe the why seems pretty obvious to you, right? They like food. And that's certainly a component of it, but it's actually a lot more complicated than that. So the roots of this begging behavior are actually based in animal training. So you may have heard of this word called positive reinforcement. And it's a really important element of training animals, and it contributes to why dogs beg for food at the table. So positive reinforcement is basically defined as giving an animal something that it likes after it does a particular behavior. And by rewarding it for that behavior, it increases the likelihood that the behavior is going to happen again. And we know that many of our dogs, not all of them, but many of them are very food motivated. That means that you can get a dog to do all sorts of different things by using food as a reward. And so clearly one of the answers to this why question of dogs beg is because they like it. And they're highly motivated to get food. But I bet you didn't know that one of the other reasons that dogs beg for food is that you are probably actually training your dog to beg, which probably you didn't mean to do. So let me explain how that might be occurring. It's actually related to reinforcement. So again, giving them a reward for doing a particular behavior. But we take it a step further and talk about reinforcement schedules. Basically, what that means is that it's related to how often you're rewarding an animal for a particular behavior. And so this is my dog Jackson, and I'm going to use him to demonstrate this point, or part of the point. I teach a behavior class, and I like to do a lot of little behavior experiments on him, which are fun. So reinforcement schedules. So one type of schedule is reinforcing an animal for a behavior, but giving that reward every single time the animal does the behavior. So when I first got Jackson, I was learning a lot about training animals myself. I must admit, I am not an expert in behavior training, despite my specialty, which is with cows. But you learn a lot through the process. And I learned a lot of what not to do when I first got Jackson. And one of the first behaviors I wanted to teach him was how to shake a paw, because he didn't know how to do that yet. He was from the shelter. And so there's a process for teaching a dog how to do a new behavior. But early on in the process, every single time I asked him to shake his paw, I always gave him a treat. And that's actually, in the long term, a mistake. And you'll see why it's a mistake in just a moment. So let me increase my volume. Move to, I think I start somewhere around here.
Okay, Jax. Paw. Paw. Oh, didn't get anything. Paw. Paw. Jax. Paw. Trickier.
Okay, it went really quick, but let me talk you through what happened here. So again, remember, Jackson is really motivated by food, and he was used to getting a reward every time. And when I give him food, I have it in my hand and have it closed. And so in this case, note that the very first time I ask for his paw, he slams it into my hand, and he does it really quickly, right? But then I open my hands and he sees I don't have food. And then I ask for the paw again, and he doesn't give his paw. Let's just watch that one more time.
Okay, Jax. Paw. Paw. Oh, didn't get anything. Paw. Paw. Jax. Paw. Trickier.
Okay, so there you go. So that was my mistake with training, because when you reward a behavior every single time, as soon as the animal knows, oh, I'm not getting a reward this time, what's the point? I'm not going to do the behavior for you. So you can lose behaviors pretty quickly when the reinforcement schedule is one-to-one. Every time the animal does a behavior, it gets the reward. So how does this all relate to the begging of the food? and why you're training your animal to beg for food. So the idea is when you lengthen that time to give a reward. So in the case of Jackson, if I got him to shake a paw, and today he doesn't get a reward for shaking that, and maybe he gets a reward for the next day. So when you irregularly give the reward, this actually strengthens the behavior in their mind, and they're less likely to stop doing the behavior even in the absence of a reward. And as you start to increase the amount of time between rewards, that makes it stronger and stronger in the minds of your animal. So now think about begging behavior at the table, right? Dog comes to the table and you're like, oh, I feel particularly bad. You had a hard, busy day. Here's a little bit of food for you. And the dog in his head, he's like, haha, success. And then he comes up again and you're like, I gave you food, go away. And then he comes up again and you're like, no, go away. And then he comes up again, you're like, okay, here's some food. Well, you know what? You've just now been training your dog. You've been implementing this irregular reinforcement schedule. And because of that, you're actually strengthening this begging behavior at the table. And it's going to be harder and harder and harder for you to stop that behavior in your dog. So going forward, if this sounds familiar to you, it's hard, but honestly, the best way to get rid of this behavior is just to never feed your dog from the table and be consistent. Okay, let's move on and talk a little bit about why animals might help each other, right? Kind of a different area. It's this idea that do animals cooperate, right? We know that we help each other out and there's lots of potential benefits for us. But it's been a question for a long time of whether animals can do that or not. So one of the ways to start answering this question is think about why an animal might want to cooperate. So it can happen for different reasons. It can be really important for survival. It can help animals find food. It can help animals avoid predators. You can see in the case of ants even cooperate. Here they're creating an ant bridge to help them move from one leaf to the next. Cooperation can be really important for helping animals make bonds between themselves, which therefore can be important for survival. And there's this other idea, complicated words called reciprocity, but that basically means if I help you today, then you'll probably help me tomorrow. If you scratch my back, I'll scratch yours. That's this concept of reciprocity. And for a long time, people didn't think that animals could do that. But there's some really cool evidence to show that that's not the case. So just some examples of this. You may have heard of or even seen this particular behavior in fish. This is called shoaling, a fish shoal, or sometimes it's referred to a bait ball. But this is animals or fish working together, coordinating their activities, especially for predator avoidance. So I'll just pause it there. So the way they avoid predators, right, is they lump really closely together and they move in tandem. And a fish is pretty small, right? If a fish was all by itself, it's really easy for a predator to isolate it and get it, right? So by grouping themselves all together, now all of a sudden they're a big mass. And like the video said, it can confuse predators and make it a lot more difficult for them to actually get or prey on these fish. You see a similar behavior in birds. So this behavior is a little bit more uncommon, but maybe you've seen this oftentimes out in the prairies when you're traveling kind of on the big flat open lands. These are birds. They might not look like birds, but they're birds. And this behavior is called murmuration. So cool, and I love that last part of the video because you can hear the roar of all of these birds flying all at once. And actually, the word murmuration actually derives from the meaning of to roar or to grumble. And so again, there's been a lot of interest in understanding why birds do this. And, you know, a lot of the theories are that it does relate to safety in numbers, predator avoidance. These are starlings, which are relatively small birds and can be taken out by other avian predators like eagles or hawks. But people also believe that it has aspects in communication. So by moving in this synchronous way, by being together, that they can communicate things like location of food sources. So just a little bit more about social bonding and this idea of reciprocity. So cooperation, right? The act of grooming is a type of cooperation, and it's a type of reciprocity. You see it a lot in monkeys where they literally scratch each other's backs and receive it in return. But there's a lot of other really cool studies that have shown through experiments that animals truly cooperate to achieve certain outcomes. So here's a clip from one of my favorite TED Talks by Dr. Frans de Waal. Fascinating. I'll bring him up again when I refer to a book that he wrote. But this is a TED Talk called Moral Behavior in Animals. Jot it down. Highly recommend you go and watch it. It's on YouTube. So this is just a short clip from it that talks about cooperation in animals and what it means.
Here, this is a very old video from the Huzzey Primate Center where they train chimpanzees to cooperate. So this is already about 100 years ago that we were doing experiments on cooperation. And what you have here is two young chimpanzees who have a box, and the box is too heavy for one chimp to pull in. And of course, there's food on the box, otherwise they wouldn't be pulling so hard. And so they're bringing in the box. And you can see that they're synchronized. You can see that they work together. They pull at the same moment. It's already a big advance over many other animals who wouldn't be able to do that. And now you're going to get a more interesting picture because now one of the two chimps has been fed. So one of the two is not really interested in the task anymore. Now look at what happens at the very end of this. He takes basically everything. So there are two interesting parts about this. One is that the chimp on the right has a full understanding he needs the partner, so full understanding of the need for cooperation. The second one is that the partner is willing to work even though he's not interested in the food. Why would that be? Well, that probably has to do with reciprocity. There's actually a lot of evidence in primates and other animals that they return favors. And so he will get a return favor at some point in the future. And so that's how this all operates. We do the same task with elephants. Now, with elephants, it's very dangerous to work with elephants. And another problem with elephants is that you cannot make an apparatus that is too heavy for a single elephant. Now, you can probably make it, but it's going to be a pretty clumsy apparatus, I think. And so what we did in their case, we do these studies in Thailand with Josh Plotnick, is we have an apparatus around of which there's a rope, a single rope. And if you pull on this side of the rope disappears on the other side. So 2 elephants need to pick it up at exactly the same time and pull. Otherwise, nothing is going to happen, and the rope disappears. And so the first tape you're going to see is 2 elephants who are released together, arrive at the apparatus. The apparatus is on the left with food on it. And so they come together, they arrive together, they pick it up together, and they pull together. So it's actually fairly simple for them. There they are. So that's how they bring it in. But now we're going to make it more difficult, because the whole purpose of this experiment is to see how well they understand cooperation. Do they understand it as well as the chimps, for example? And so what we do in the next step is we release one elephant before the other, and that elephant needs to be smart enough to stay there and wait and not pull at the rope, because if he pulls at the rope, it disappears and the whole test is over. This elephant does something illegal that we did not teach it, but it shows the understanding that he has, because he puts his big foot on the rope, stands on the rope and waits there for the other, and then the other is going to do all the work for him. So it's what we call freeloading. But it shows the intelligence that the elephants had. They developed several of these alternative techniques that we did not approve of necessarily. So the other elephant is now coming. And is going to pull it in. Now look at the other doesn't forget to eat, of course.
Okay, so just love those experiments. Really fascinating example of multiple species being able to cooperate, and also demonstrating the level of intelligence that these animals have. So I'll get back to the question of intelligence as we finish up today. So totally switching gears, talking about another completely different question about animal behavior. Why do cows snore, right? Maybe even the first question is, do cows snore? Well, let me assure you that they do. Here's a cow snoring. And you can watch 5 minutes of snoring, I think, with this YouTube clip. So cows definitely snore, and you know we all snore. And when do we snore? When we snore when we're asleep, right? So the answer to why do cows snore is fairly obvious. It's because they're sleeping. Snoring isn't commonly observed in a lot of animals. Usually because snoring happens when they're more in like deep, really restful sleep, which animals do get to. But it all comes back to this concept of sleeping behavior in animals. And sleep is a behavior, even though when we're sleeping, we're not doing a heck of a lot, but it is absolutely a behavior, and it's a really important one for us and for animals. One of the things it allows us to do is think better, right? It allows our bodies and our brains to rest, and that helps us learn new things, process information better. In the case of cows, cows are really big animals, so it helps them get off their feet, which can be really important for maintaining healthy feet and hooves. And just that rest allows them to conserve energy, which when we're talking dairy cows is really important because they put a lot of energy into producing milk. So in the dairy industry, rest is super important and always on the minds of a dairy producer. They want their cows to rest. And so a big focus of management is on this idea called cow comfort. So what does that mean in terms of rest? Well, the big question is, how do we design lying environments that encourage cows to lie down? In other words, how do we make lying stalls more comfortable? Well, the first thing that you need to do in order to attempt answering that question is, surprise, surprise, look at cow behavior and specifically their lying behavior. So, okay, we know that, but what are the particular behaviors that we're looking at that might indicate, yep, they're comfortable, or nope, there's an issue? Well, let me say this is an example of a dairy barn where they've got good cow comfort. How do you know? Well, I look down the row and almost every single stall is being used and all the cows are lying down and I don't see any cows standing. That's a really good sign that the dairy producer is doing something right. These are behaviors that might indicate you have a problem with the comfort of the lying stalls. So sometimes you see cows' legs extending past the stall or even going into the next stall. Cows turned around backwards. This is not the proper orientation for a cow. This is a dog sitting behavior of cows, which is not a normal position for a cow to be in and can indicate that there's a problem with the stall design. And then certainly when you see cows not using the stalls at all and choosing to lie down on the hard alley surfaces, that's a serious sign that you've got some stall problems. And so what could be some of the reasons? There's a lot of different reasons that could be. It could be that the beds don't have enough bedding, that they're not soft enough, and so it's not comfortable for them to lie down. I don't have a video of it here, but when you watch a cow lie down, the way they do it is first drop to their knees, and then so kind of lean forward, drop to their front knees, and then go back and kind of rest on their haunches. So imagine a 1,500-pound cow putting all of that weight onto her knees as she drops down onto that hard concrete. That's serious risk for injury. The stalls are too small, if there's too many cows, and if there's no lunge space. So if you're not in the dairy industry, you're probably like, well, what the heck is lunge space? Well, let me tell you. Really, really important aspect of lying behavior in cows. So lunge space is basically the amount of open area that a cow needs in the front of her in order to properly and comfortably lie down and also get up. So I'm going to play a video clip, maybe I'll play it twice, that shows two cows attempting to stand up from a lying position. And I want you to just look at the two examples and compare some of the differences. Maybe ask yourself, which cow looks like she's having a harder time standing up? Okay, so it went pretty quickly there, but let's see if I can stop it and replay that. Oh gosh, maybe not. But let me just talk you through it. So in that first video, what you saw was that cow, she rocked forward and and when she was doing that, she utilized a lot of that space. I don't know if I can find that. Oh, I think that's it. Here we go. So watch her, she'll rock her head forward and she'll use a lot of space in the front of her body. And that helps give her the momentum to rock back and get up on her feet. See, and we call that the lunge. And you see she's up pretty quickly. This cow has got a big wall right in front of her face. And so you see her head, it can't move forward at all. And so she needs to use a whole different set of muscles to get that big body weight up. And that's something that producers need to pay attention to, because if a cow cannot comfortably lie down or get up, they're not going to want to lie down. And that can be one of the reasons that cows don't rest, they don't snore, and could be a major problem for a dairy producer. So this analysis of lying behavior helps us make recommendations to producers. If I went to a farm and they were asking me to do a behavior assessment on their animals, I would watch cows get up and lie down. I would look at features of the environment, like how their stalls are designed. And I look at this stall in red and I see this big wall right in front of her. The first thing I would recommend to this producer would be knock that wall down, get rid of it, because that cow needs that space in front of her to help her get up and down. That's an example of a problem. This is a really nice design with lots of lunge space. Okay, let me finish up. I got my cow talk in. So I like to end with this because a fascinating topic, I think. And it's this idea of how do we measure how smart or how intelligent animals are? And again, one of my favorite scientists right now, Dr. Frans de Waal, he wrote this fascinating book, and it's called Are We Smart Enough to Know How Smart Animals Are? And that title really nicely summarizes one of the challenges us as humans and researchers have had to overcome, because when we think about animals, a lot of time we're stuck in terms of thinking about animals and smartness and language in terms of human smartness and human language, and using that as our basis for comparison. So in this book and in science, we need to challenge ourselves to understand the different ways that animals communicate, experience their world. And once we kind of take it to that level, there's a lot of evidence that animals are in fact very, very intelligent. And it goes back a long way. People have been interested in this topic. I don't know if you've heard the story of Clever Hans. Back in 1904, he was a very famous horse, and he was famous because it was believed that he could solve complex mathematical questions that were simply verbally asked to him by humans. And the way he would answer questions would be to tap his foot or his hoof on the ground. And these were mathematical questions, so the answer always had to be a number. And to answer with the number, he would tap his hooves the correct number of times. Now we know horses don't speak English, but this horse very reliably could get the right answer. So somebody would go up to him and say, okay, Clever Hans, today is Monday. How many days from today will it take to get to Friday? Okay, so Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The answer is 4. And sure enough, Clever Hans, after the question, would tap 1, 2, 3, 4. And he'd get the answer correct. And it didn't matter what kind of question you asked him. They had different people ask questions, not just his trainer. They thought, well, maybe somebody in the crowd is kind of like giving them the answer. So they did it in big crowds. They did it with Hans by himself. And this horse was always getting the right answer. What they found at the end of the day was that the horse wasn't understanding the human language, but he was picking up on very subtle cues that the humans were giving, that the humans didn't even know that they were giving to the horse. So what happened was, if I asked this question to Clever Hans, and I started, seeing the taps, I started to get like tense or maybe even anxious. Like, is he going to tap all the way to 4? He's got to 2. Like, is he going to get to 4? Oh, he got to 4. And I relax. And the horse was able to pick up on those changes in body posture, facial expression. And through seeing that, he knew that was his cue to stop tapping. And of course, there were rewards for him getting the right answer, which is why he was motivated to do it. So was Clever Hans intelligent in the sense that humans think, like solve complex mathematical questions? No. But was he intelligent to the point where he could identify these really subtle changes in facial expression that told him, okay, this is the right time to stop? Yes, 100%. So it kind of begs the question of redefining how we define intelligence in animals. So when we're talking about intelligence, it can be anything from knowing when to avoid a predator, knowing where to find the best food. Tool use is going to be an example my last example that I share with you. Being able to solve problems like Clever Hans, being able to learn new tasks. All of these areas are related to a field of science called cognition, or animal cognition. And again, cognition just means how an animal or a human thinks, how they process information, how they learn new tasks. And there's been lots of studies on this topic. I think Chase is claimed to be the world's smartest dog. Over the course of 3 years, Chase, a border collie, has learned to identify the names of 1,022 different toys. And this is 2 pictures of Chase with his toy, and here he is right at the top of his pile of toys, and here in the center of his toys. So you could lay out a spread of toys and say, Chase, go and find the yellow bear. And sure enough, every time he would go out and pick the yellow bear. Chase, go out and find the purple dinosaur. And you'd go and find the purple dinosaur. So a lot of retention of information, a lot of memory is definitely at play here. Can all dogs do this? No, not necessarily. Just like humans, animals have different abilities in different types of areas. The training that went on with this dog took 3 years, so there's a lot of that element and devotion to this. But again, it just is an example to show the cognitive capacity, the memory learning capacity of animals. So let me finish up with a cool example of tool use in animals. Again, the use of tools was something that back in the day, scientists thought only humans could know how to use a tool to achieve something. But today we know that that's definitely not the case. Monkeys have been observed using rocks to smash apart seeds in order to get at the nut within the hard kernel. This is a sea otter using a rock balanced on its belly to smash an oyster against so that it can crack the oyster open to get the food inside. This is an elephant using a branch to scratch the flies and wipe the flies away that's on its hide. And crows. Crows are a very, very intelligent species of animals. And they will use twigs to stick into holes and crevices in trees and in the ground to collect termites and other insects that will attach themselves to that twig, and they'll pull it up and can feed that way. So many cool uses of tools in animals. And again, it highlights that real upper level cognitive thinking. So let me show you a video. I've showed you several videos of elephants. Elephants are another extremely intelligent species. And again, going back to, why we care about all of this stuff, kind of hot topics in animal welfare have been, in zoos, keeping these highly intelligent animals in captivity. Is that right? Is that wrong? A lot of moral, ethical questions to be had. So this is a video of an elephant using a tool in order, it's kind of hard to see, but he looked up at it for just a moment. They're hanging from high above is a branch with some leaves that this elephant really wants to get to, but you can see it so high up, even by him stretching out his trunk, he couldn't quite reach that branch. So this elephant is intelligent enough to know that he's got a tool or a resource in his pen that's going to help him get high enough to reach that branch. So you can see he's rolling over his block. He's going to use it like a little ladder so that he can step up and be now tall enough to reach that branch. Not quite, but almost. Oh shoot, my video cut off a little early, but oh no, what's happening here? But end of the story, he got the food, and again, it just shows the level of intelligence. Wow. This is what happens when you use YouTube videos of animals. So yeah, that's, you know, a whirlwind introduction to animal behavior and a bunch of different topics and how we use them. So take home message, I love animal behavior and studying it is absolutely fascinating. And it's important to study this because it can help us understand a lot about what's important to animals and therefore what we can do for them to make their lives better. So I'll just finish up with one of my favorite little videos right now of from about a year ago when Washington got a whole bunch of snow and one of their resident pandas was enjoying a lot of playful behavior. So I'm not going to get into play behavior in animals today, but hopefully after this conversation, you can maybe consider this behavior and wonder, why is this panda doing this? So with that, I will say thank you and would be happy to answer any questions that have come up.